"You're late tonight," the tattooed guy said, and that was the first time I realized he had been counting my Thursdays. I stood in the doorway of Bright Spin Laundromat with rain dripping from the ends of my hair, my work shoes squeaking against the old tile, and a ripped canvas laundry bag digging a red line into my shoulder. It was 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes later than usual, and the city outside looked like it had been smeared in blue neon and dirty water. Cars hissed past the windows on Euclid Avenue, headlights stretching across the glass, while the machines inside turned and turned with that heavy, sleepy rhythm that made the whole place feel separate from the rest of Chicago. I should have ignored him. I usually did. Omegas like me learned early that silence was safer than gratitude, and gratitude was safer than hope. But my eyes went straight to the chair beside dryer number 6, the one with the cracked plastic seat and the perfect angle where no one could come up behind me. It was empty, just like it had been every Thursday night for the past 7 weeks. Not because no one wanted it. Bright Spin only had 8 chairs, and most of them were usually taken by college kids with earbuds, tired parents folding school uniforms, or old men reading newspapers like the world still made sense. But that chair was always open when I arrived, as if the laundromat itself had saved one small mercy for me. 2 seats away sat Mason Reed, though I did not know his name yet. To me, he was just the tattooed guy from the late-night cycle, tall and quiet in a black hoodie, with ink curling over his hands like dark vines and disappearing beneath his sleeves. He had a laundry basket at his feet, a worn paperback open in one hand, and a cup of gas station coffee balanced on the orange plastic table beside him. He did not look at me the way most alphas looked at an omega who kept his scent buried under cheap suppressants and exhaustion. He did not stare too long. He did not smile like he expected something in return. He simply shifted his knee a few inches, making the path to the chair easier, then looked back down at his book as if saving me a seat every week. Was the most ordinary thing in the world. My fingers tightened around the laundry bag. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere near the back, a dryer clunked around a pair of sneakers with a lonely, uneven thud. I wanted to say I was late because the night manager at the convenience store had made me restock the coolers after closing. I wanted to say I had almost turned around twice because the rain made my suppressant patch itch, and every passing alpha on the bus had made my stomach twist with panic. Instead, I swallowed and crossed the room, leaving damp footprints behind me. Mason did not move closer. He did not ask questions. He just let the chair wait for me. And maybe that was why, when I finally sat down beside dryer number 6 and felt its gentle heat warm my shaking hands, the first dangerous thought slipped through me like a match struck in the dark. Maybe there was one place in this city where I did not have to run. I kept my eyes on the machines because looking at Mason felt too much like admitting I had noticed him long before tonight. Dryer number 6 breathed warm air against my knees while my clothes spun behind the round glass door, a blur of faded work shirts, black socks, and the one gray sweater I wore whenever the apartment got too cold. I had rules for surviving in Chicago. Pay cash whenever possible. Never give strangers my full name. Sit with my back to a wall. Keep a fresh suppressant patch under my sleeve. Smile at customers, but never long enough for them to think it meant something. Those rules had kept me safe for 8 months, ever since I moved into a 5th-floor studio above a closed pawn shop and started pretending I was just another tired face on the late bus. Kindness was not one of my rules. Kindness had too many hidden costs. So when Mason cleared his throat softly and slid a small paper towel across the orange table toward me, I almost flinched. Rain was still dripping from my hair onto my collar, cold threads running down the back of my neck, but I did not reach for it right away. He seemed to understand. He pushed it only halfway, then leaned back, giving me the choice to take it or ignore it. That was the strange thing about him. Everything he did had an exit. Every gesture had space around it. Most alphas filled a room, even when they were trying not to, their presence pressing against the walls, against skin, against breath. Mason was different. He was large enough to make the old plastic chair look too small, and his tattoos made people glance twice before choosing another corner. But he held himself still, contained, like a door that would not open unless invited. I finally took the paper towel and rubbed it over my hair. The cheap fabric scratched my fingers. Across from me, the washing machines hummed in uneven harmony, and the vending machine buzzed with its tired yellow light. I told myself not to speak. Then my mouth betrayed me. I said, I am not usually late. Mason turned one page in his book before answering, as if he did not want to make my words feel heavier than they were. I know. 2 simple words, calm and low, and my chest tightened. I should have hated that he noticed. I should have gathered my damp laundry and left before the cycle even finished. Instead, I heard myself ask, "Do you keep track of everyone who comes in here?" His mouth almost curved, not quite a smile, more like the memory of one. Only the people who look like they are deciding whether to run back into the rain. Heat rose to my face, sharp and embarrassing. I looked away, pretending to check the timer. 23 minutes left. 23 minutes trapped beside a man who had seen too much without asking for any of it. The front windows rattled as a bus rolled past outside. For a second, the reflection in the glass showed us sitting near each other, not together, but not entirely separate either. Me, small and soaked and trying to disappear. Him, dark and quiet, one tattooed hand resting near his coffee, the other keeping his book open. The chair between us remained empty, a careful distance neither of us crossed. I wanted to believe that meant nothing. I wanted to believe he was only polite, only bored, only a stranger with a late laundry schedule and too many tattoos. But when the dryer clunked once and I startled hard enough to drop the paper towel, Mason did not laugh. He only lowered his book, looked toward the door first, and then toward me, as if the danger in the room mattered more than my fear of being seen. That was when I understood the real problem. I was not scared because Mason felt dangerous. I was scared because, for the first time in months, he did not. After that night, Thursdays became the one thing I tried not to look forward to and failed every single time. I told myself it was only laundry, only soap powder, only the same cracked tile floor, and the same row of machines with handwritten signs taped to the broken ones. I told myself I came because Bright Spin was open 24 hours, because my building charged too much for the basement washers, because the bus stop outside had a working light and Mrs. Harper behind the counter always pretended not to notice when I counted quarters twice. None of that explained why my heart changed rhythm every time I pushed open the glass door and saw him there. Mason always arrived before me. Sometimes he had a black duffel bag at his feet, sometimes a basket of dark clothes folded with careful, almost military precision, sometimes nothing but his coffee and that worn paperback with the bent spine. The chair by dryer number 6 was always empty. Not dramatically, not like a gift wrapped in ribbon, but quietly, stubbornly, as if the whole room had agreed it belonged to me and no one else was allowed to question it. Our routine built itself out of tiny things. I would choose washer number 3 because it shook less than the others. He would slide the rolling basket closer with his boot before I had to reach for it. I would pretend I had enough quarters. He would leave 3 or 4 on top of the machine, never looking at them, never looking at me, as if loose change appeared in laundromats by weather pattern. I always bought lemon lime soda from the vending machine because it was the cheapest. On the 4th Thursday after he spoke to me, the machine swallowed my dollar and gave me nothing but a grinding sound. I stood there staring through the scratched plastic at the bottle stuck behind the coil, too tired to be angry, too proud to ask for help. Mason rose from his chair and walked over, not close enough to crowd me, just close enough for his scent to drift through the stale detergent air. It was cedar smoke after snow, warm underneath the cold, and it made my shoulders drop before I could stop them. He fed $2 into the slot, pressed the button once, and 2 bottles dropped with a heavy thump. He placed one on the folding table between us. "Machine owed you interest," he said. I should have refused. Instead, I took it and whispered, "Thanks." His eyes flicked to mine then, gray and steady, and for one foolish second the laundromat disappeared. No rain on the windows. No late bus groaning at the curb. No city pressing its palms against the glass. Just his hand retreating before I could feel trapped, and my own fingers wrapped around a cold plastic bottle like it was something precious. That was the week Mrs. Harper finally gave me his name. She was wiping lint from the dryers with a pink rag when she leaned toward me and said, "Mason Reed is quieter than he looks, but quiet is not the same as empty." I glanced at him before I could help it. He was folding a black shirt with his head bowed, tattoos shifting over his forearms like inked shadows under fluorescent light. When he looked up, I turned away too fast and almost dropped my soda. For the first time in 8 months, I laughed. It was small, startled, barely there, but it was real. Mason heard it. He did not smile all the way, but something in his face softened, and the chair beside dryer number 6 suddenly felt less like a hiding place and more like the beginning of a dangerous kind of home. The fifth Thursday felt wrong before I even reached the door. Rain had turned the sidewalk into black glass, and the red sign above Brightspin flickered hard enough to make the whole block look nervous. I paused beneath the awning with my laundry bag hugged against my chest, watching the reflection of the street stretch and break across the windows. Mason was already inside, but he was not in his usual place. That was the first warning. He had moved from the 2 chairs beside dryer number 6 to the front corner near the entrance, where the vending machine light cut across his tattooed hands and left the rest of him in shadow. His book was closed. His coffee was untouched. One boot rested flat on the tile, angled toward the door like he had been waiting for something other than me. The chair by the dryer was still empty, but this time it did not feel like a kindness. It felt like a shelter prepared before a storm. I pushed inside, and the bell above the door gave its tired little ring. Mason looked at me, then past me, through the wet glass and into the street. My body knew before my mind did. Every careful rule I had built in Chicago tightened around my ribs. I turned too quickly, searching the curb, the parked cars, the dark mouth of the alley beside the liquor store. For half a second, I saw only rain and headlights. Then a black sedan rolled slowly past the laundromat, too slow for traffic, too deliberate for a stranger. Its windows were tinted, but I felt the weight of someone looking through them. My hand went to the patch beneath my sleeve. It was still there, but the edges had started to peel from the damp. Mason stood without making a sound. He did not come close to me. He simply stepped into the space between me and the door, his broad shoulders blocking the view of the street. The air changed around him, not sharp, not threatening, but steady, like a fireplace catching before the cold could fill a room. "Is he the reason you never come before midnight?" he asked. My throat closed. The question was too precise. Not curious, not careless. It landed exactly where I had buried the answer. I tried to laugh, but the sound broke before it became anything useful. "I do not know what you mean." Mason did not challenge the lie. That almost made it worse. He glanced at my wrist, at the frayed edge of the patch showing beneath my cuff, then looked away before I could feel exposed. "You do not have to tell me." The machines kept spinning. A sneaker thudded inside a dryer. Mrs. Harper moved behind the counter, pretending to sort quarters while watching us from the reflection of the microwave door. I should have walked to washer number 3. I should have acted normal. Instead, I stayed frozen. Rainwater dripping from my coat onto the tile in small, accusing drops. Outside, the sedan reached the end of the block and turned the corner, disappearing like a bad memory that had learned patience. Only then did Mason move. He took one step back, opening the path to my chair again. "You can sit down, Evan," he said quietly. I had never told him my name. I stared at Mason as if his voice had reached into a locked drawer inside me and pulled out something I had hidden under every false smile, every cash receipt, every careful step through the city. Evan. Not kid. Not sweetheart. Not the name Caleb used when he wanted me to feel small. My real name, spoken gently, like it belonged to me. The laundromat seemed to narrow around us. Washer number 3 clicked into its rinse cycle. A woman near the back folded tiny pajamas into a plastic basket. Mrs. Harper set a roll of quarters on the counter with deliberate softness, giving me the mercy of pretending she was not listening. I should have demanded to know how Mason knew. I should have walked out into the rain and never come back. Instead, my knees gave up first, and I sat down in the chair beside dryer number 6 because it was the only place in the room that had never asked me to explain why I was shaking. Mason remained standing for another moment, his eyes on the street, then returned to his seat 2 chairs away. He did not corner me with his concern. He did not fill the silence with apologies. He waited, and somehow that made the truth start leaking out of me one careful piece at a time. "I used to live in Oak Park," I said, my voice so quiet it nearly disappeared beneath the machines, "with someone I thought was helping me." Mason did not move, but his attention settled on me fully, warm and steady. I kept my hands in my lap so he would not see my fingers twist together. Caleb Shaw had not looked frightening at first. That was the part people never understood. He had looked responsible. Clean shirt, charming smile, the kind of alpha who opened doors in public and remembered how you took your coffee. When I was 23 and newly alone after my aunt moved to Arizona, he helped me find a room, helped me get a job, helped me believe depending on him was the same as being cared for. Then help became permission. Permission became rules. He wanted to know where I went, who I spoke to, why I needed my own bank account, why I wore suppressants when he said my natural scent was nothing to be ashamed of. He never had to raise his voice to make a room feel smaller. He just had to look disappointed, and I would fold myself into the version of me that caused the least trouble. I left on a Tuesday morning, I said. I packed one backpack and took the green line before sunrise. I changed my phone number at a gas station on the west side. I paid cash for everything after that. Mason looked down at his hands, and I noticed the tension in them, the way his tattooed fingers curled once around nothing before relaxing again. He was angry, but not at me. That difference almost hurt. The sedan, he said. I nodded. I started seeing it 2 weeks ago, outside the store, near my building. Tonight was the first time it followed me here. My throat tightened around the last word. Here, the only place that still felt untouched. Mason slowly reached toward the orange table and slid the unopened lemon-lime soda closer to me. Not as a solution, not as a distraction, just something cold and real for my hands to hold. How did you know my name? I asked. He looked toward Mrs. Harper, then back at me. You dropped your work badge the second week. I gave it to her instead of chasing you into the parking lot. A stunned laugh broke out of me, thin and wet with relief. Of course he had. Any other alpha would have followed. Mason had returned my name without using it. Until tonight. Outside, thunder rolled softly over the city, distant enough to be harmless, but close enough to remind me the storm had not passed. Mason leaned back, leaving the space between us open. Evan, he said, and this time my name sounded less like a secret and more like a door. You do not have to run alone anymore. For a long moment, I did not answer Mason, because not running alone sounded too much like a wish, and wishes had always been the first step toward disappointment. I twisted the cap off the soda and held the cold bottle between my palms while the bubbles climbed behind the green plastic, bright and restless under the laundromat lights. Outside, the rain kept tapping against the windows, softer now, like the city had lowered its voice to listen. Mason sat 2 chairs away, exactly where he always sat, leaving the empty chair between us untouched. That distance should have made him feel less important. Instead, it made every quiet choice he had made for weeks stand out with painful clarity. He had not taken the seat beside me when he could have. He had not followed me when I dropped my badge. He had not asked for my story until the night my past rolled past the windows in a black sedan. I looked down at the faded floor tiles and said, "Why did you do all this?" Mason did not pretend not to understand. He closed his book and set it on his laundry basket. The movement was slow, careful, giving me time to look away if I wanted. The first week you came in, you checked every exit before you chose a chair, he said. You kept one shoulder toward the wall. You watched the door in the reflection of dryer number 6. You counted your quarters 3 times because your hands were shaking too hard to trust them. My face burned. I hated being seen that clearly. I hated that some part of me also felt relieved. So you studied me? I asked, sharper than I meant to. Mason accepted the edge in my voice without flinching. No, I recognized you. The answer took the breath out of my chest. He looked toward the front window, where his reflection hovered over the wet glass. All dark hoodie, gray eyes, and inked hands folded loosely between his knees. Not your name, not your life. Just the look of someone trying to make a public place feel safe enough to sit down. The washing machines hummed around us, and for the first time, I noticed the scar near the base of his thumb, pale beneath the black lines of his tattoos. Not ugly, not frightening, just a quiet mark from a life I did not know. I did not save that chair because I felt sorry for you, he said. I saved it because you chose it like it mattered. Back to the wall. Dryer heat on one side. Clear view of the door. Nobody close enough to touch you by accident. That was not random. My throat tightened. I wanted to deny it, but the truth was sitting under me in cracked orange plastic. Mason took a breath, and his scent warmed the air, cedar smoke wrapped in winter. The chair gave you control. I had no right to take that from you. Something inside me loosened and hurt at the same time. All my life, people had called my fear dramatic, inconvenient, fragile. Mason had looked at the same fear and treated it like intelligence. And the coins? I asked, because I needed something smaller to hold. His mouth softened. You always looked like you were deciding which shirt you could afford to wash. I laughed once, but it came out broken. He looked at me then, not with pity, but with a sadness that stayed on his side of the space between us. I was not trying to get closer to you, Evan. I was trying to make sure you had a place where nothing was taken. The words settled over me warmer than the dryer at my back. For 8 months, I had believed safety meant being invisible. But Mason had seen me every week and somehow made the room larger instead of smaller. I looked at the empty chair between us, at the gap he had never crossed without permission, and realized the most dangerous thing about him was not his size, his tattoos, or the alpha steadiness in his voice. It was that he had protected my freedom so quietly, I had almost mistaken it for silence. The bell above the door rang before I could answer, and every machine in Bright Spin seemed to fall quieter at once, even though nothing had changed but the air. I knew who it was before I turned around. Some memories did not need a face. They arrived as a pressure behind the ribs, as cold at the back of the neck, as the old instinct to become smaller before anyone asked you to. Caleb Shaw stepped in from the rain wearing a navy coat I remembered too well, his blonde hair damp at the edges, his smile polished enough to pass for concern if you did not know how carefully it had been practiced. Behind the counter, Mrs. Harper stopped counting quarters. The woman folding pajamas gathered her basket a little closer. Mason did not stand right away. That was what made him different. He did not explode into the room. He did not turn my fear into his performance. He only looked at me first, as if the next move belonged to me. Caleb's eyes found mine, and the whole laundromat shrank. "There you are," he said, using the gentle voice that had fooled strangers for months. "I have been worried sick." My fingers went numb around the soda bottle. The words sounded kind, but my body remembered all the doors they used to close. I forced myself to breathe through my nose, but the damp had finally won. The suppressant patch beneath my sleeve loosened at one corner, then another, peeling away from my skin like a secret giving up. I felt my natural scent slip into the detergent-heavy air, faint at first, then warmer, nervous, unmistakably Omega. Caleb's expression changed by less than an inch. Satisfaction moved through his eyes, quick and private. "Evan," he said, softer now, like my name still belonged in his mouth. "Come on, let us go home." Home. The word almost made me laugh because it was so wrong. My home was a fifth-floor studio with bad heating, a mattress on the floor, and a window that stuck in the summer. My home was cheap coffee before sunrise and the sound of washer number 3 starting its rinse cycle. My home, if I had one at all, had become this cracked orange chair and the quiet alpha who had never once demanded I sit closer. Mason rose then, slowly, not between me and my choice, but between Caleb and the path to my chair. His voice was calm enough to make the fluorescent lights feel louder. "That seat is taken." Caleb looked him over, from the tattoos on his hands to the steady set of his shoulders, and gave a small, dismissive smile. "This is a private matter." Mason did not move. "Then you can discuss it from there." The space between them held, clean and clear, no raised hands, no threat, only a boundary drawn so firmly that even the rain outside seemed to pause against the glass. Caleb's smile thinned. "You do not know him." Mason glanced back at me, and in that single look there was no command, no claim, no expectation. Only a question. "Do you want me here?" My heart beat so hard I could hear it under the dryers. For 8 months, I had survived by leaving before I was chosen, agreeing before I was cornered, disappearing before anyone could decide what I needed. But Mason waited. Mrs. Harper waited. Even the machines seemed to wait. I stood on shaking legs, not because the fear was gone, but because something stronger had finally stood up beside it. I took one step forward and gripped the sleeve of Mason's hoodie, just enough to feel the warmth beneath the fabric. "He is with me," I said. My voice trembled, but it did not break. Mason's shoulders eased, as if those 4 words had given him permission to become a wall. Caleb stared at my hand on Mason's sleeve, and for the first time since I had known him, he looked unsure. Not defeated, not dramatic, just unable to find the old version of me he had expected to control. I looked at him through the humming laundromat, through the glow of the vending machine and the rain-striped windows, and realized the chair had never only been a chair. It had been practice. Every Thursday, Mason had saved me a place until I remembered I was allowed to choose where I stood. Caleb's stare moved from my hand on Mason's sleeve to Mason's face, searching for a crack, a weakness, some opening he could turn into permission. He found none. Mason did not crowd him. He did not lift his voice. He simply stood there with the stillness of someone who knew exactly how much space a boundary deserved. "Evan," Caleb said, and the softness in his tone felt thin as paper. "You are confused. You have always gotten overwhelmed when strangers put ideas in your head. The old version of me would have apologized just to make the room easier to breathe in. The old version of me would have stepped forward, smiled at Mrs. Harper, and pretended everything was fine while my whole body begged me not to leave. But the old version of me had never stood under fluorescent lights with warm, drier air at his back, and Mason Reed waiting for my choice instead of taking it from me. I loosened my grip on Mason's sleeve, not because I wanted distance, but because I wanted Caleb to see my hand lower by my own decision. "I am not confused," I said. My voice was still quiet, but it carried farther than I expected. "I left because I wanted to leave. I stayed gone because I wanted to stay gone. I am asking you to walk out of this laundromat and stop following me." Caleb's smile disappeared. For a moment, the handsome mask slipped, and beneath it was only irritation, sharp and ordinary, not powerful at all. That should have made him less frightening. Instead, it made me realize how much of my fear had been built from shadows. Mrs. Harper picked up the phone behind the counter and rested one finger above the screen. "Brightspin has cameras inside and outside," she said calmly. "The young man asked you to leave." Caleb looked at her, then at the woman by the folding table, then back at Mason. There were too many witnesses, too much light, too many people refusing to pretend this was private. Mason turned his head slightly toward me. "Do you want me to call someone for you?" he asked. "Not, I will handle this. Not, stay behind me." Just a question, placed gently into my hands. I took a breath that shook all the way down. "Not yet," I said. "I just want him gone." Mason nodded once and looked back at Caleb. "You heard him." The words were simple, but they settled into the room like a lock clicking into place. Caleb adjusted his coat, trying to recover his pride, but the movement looked too careful. "This is not over," he said. I thought that sentence would break me. It had broken me before. Tonight, it only made the dryer behind me sound warmer. "For me, it is," I answered. The bell rang again when he left, and rain swallowed him into the blue-black street. No one clapped. No one rushed me. The machines kept turning, the vending machine kept buzzing, and the world did not split open the way I had always imagined it would if I finally said no. My knees trembled so badly I had to sit. Mason moved only after I did, returning to the chair 2 spaces away, leaving the empty one between us like a promise he still intended to keep. Mrs. Harper came over with a fresh towel and a small packet of medical tape from the first aid box. She handed both to me, not to Mason. That mattered. I pressed the patch back into place with clumsy fingers, and Mason looked at the floor until I was done. When I finally turned to him, my chest felt hollowed out, but not empty. "Clean, maybe. Terrified, but clean." "You could have made him leave faster," I said. Mason's eyes lifted to mine. "Probably. Why did you not?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because you were the one who needed to hear yourself choose." The words hit harder than any grand rescue could have. I looked at the chair beside me, the cracked orange plastic, the warm metal legs, the small safe island that had held me every Thursday while I remembered how to belong to myself. Outside, Caleb's sedan pulled away from the curb and vanished beyond the ring. Inside, Mason slid my lemon-lime soda across the table again, his tattooed hand stopping well before mine. This time, I reached for it without flinching. By the time my last dryer cycle ended, the rain had softened into a silver mist, and Brightspin looked less like a hiding place than a room that had survived the night with me inside it. The woman with the pajamas had gone. The late bus hissed past the windows without stopping. Mrs. Harper turned the sign on the counter from open to still open because she said the other side had been lost years ago, and for the first time all evening, I laughed without immediately looking over my shoulder. My clothes came out warm and clean, smelling like cheap lavender detergent and dryer sheets, and I folded them slowly at the orange table while Mason sat nearby with his untouched book in his lap. Neither of us rushed to fill the silence. It was not empty anymore. It had changed into something careful, something alive. When I reached for my gray sweater, it slipped from my hands and fell beneath the chair beside dryer number 6. I bent down to grab it, and that was when I saw the mark carved low into the plastic seat, hidden where no one would notice unless they were close enough to kneel on the tile. a small circle around the letter M, worn smooth at the edges, as if someone had traced it with their thumb for years. I looked up at Mason, but his face had gone still in a way I had never seen before. Mrs. Harper saw it too. Her expression softened, and she set her pink rag on the counter like she had decided a secret had waited long enough. "That used to be his chair," she said quietly. Mason closed his eyes for 1 second. "Harper," she did not apologize. "People should know when they are trusted with something." My fingers tightened around the sweater. I thought it was just a seat. Mason looked at the old, orange chair, and the laundromat lights caught the silver in his gray eyes. "It was," he said. "Then it became the last place my younger brother felt safe before he left the city." His voice stayed even, but something under it trembled like the reflection of rainwater under a streetlight. "He was an Omega too, younger than you. He used to come here after late shifts because nobody bothered him when I was around. One winter, he decided he was tired of needing anyone to stand guard. He moved to Portland, changed his number, sent one postcard, and then another. He is safe now. Happy, I think. But after he left, I kept sitting here like I was waiting for him to come back." The room blurred at the edges. Not with fear this time, with the ache of understanding. Mason had not been guarding an empty chair. He had been guarding a memory. And somehow, without knowing it, I had stepped into the place where his grief had been sitting for years. I swallowed hard. "Why let me have it?" Mason looked at me then, fully, gently, without hiding behind the book or the distance. "Because the first night you sat there, it did not feel empty." The words moved through me slowly, warmer than the clothes folded beneath my hands. I wanted to say something perfect, something brave enough for the moment, but all I had was the truth. "I am still scared." Mason nodded. "I know. Caleb might come back. Then you decide what help you want, and I listen." My breath caught. Such a simple promise. No ownership. No rescue that swallowed me whole. Just listening. Just room. I looked at the chair again. At the little carved M. At the place I had mistaken for shelter when it had actually been an invitation to become real again. Then I picked up my folded laundry and stood. Mason stood too, but he did not reach for my bag until I held it out to him. The difference mattered so much I almost smiled. Outside, the mist painted the streetlights gold. Mrs. Harper unlocked the door for us, and the bell rang softly above our heads as we stepped into the damp Chicago night. Mason walked beside me, not in front, not behind, matching my pace all the way to the bus stop. When the bus arrived, I turned before climbing on. "Same time next Thursday?" I asked. His mouth curved into the quiet smile I had been waiting 8 weeks to see. "Only if you choose it." I held his gaze, then looked back through the window at Bright Spin, at dryer number 6 glowing faintly behind the glass, at the chair that had been empty until both of us learned how to sit with what we had lost. "I choose it," I said, and for the first time in a long time, going home did not feel like running away.